Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, March 11th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Sabato Crystal Ball 2022 gubernatorial races, pretty much their initial characterizations of a number of races that are up in 2022. We're talking 30 plus governor races that will ultimately determine party control on the statewide level. Now, looking at a lot of these races, you do have to understand that this is not something that is almost directly dependent on the Joe Biden approval rating or, in 2018, the Donald Trump approval rating as Senate or House elections would be. And as 2022 is being floated as potentially a red wave year, that does not necessarily mean it will translate to results on the governor level. But of course, there is always going to be more party support for the opposition party, which could actually tell us that maybe some of these races could go a certain way. But based off our initial characterizations, we're not seeing too many flips, at least straight off the bat. I'm also reminded of the 2018 gubernatorial races that were released in early 2017, and many of these characterizations were accurate. I think the only ones that really struck out to me as being incorrect were Wisconsin and Kansas, and then the rest were pretty much either spot on or were just toss-up races that were not initially characterized. So when I'm looking at this, I'm going to take this new map and look at it. I'm not showing it to you right now. This is the map that I'm talking about. I'm going to take it and say, this is what we will use to track the progress for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party over the next year and a half to see where they've made gains, where they have potential pickups, and just overall analyze the true competitive nature about some of these races. Now, what you'll notice is that maybe there are some more solid colors than what we saw back in 2018. This is largely due to the fact that some of these states have popular incumbents, especially after COVID-19. And what we're going to see in 2022 is possibly just a repudiation of some of these governors' policies pertaining to COVID-19. And just looking at this map, we do see some stark differences from what we saw back in 2018. Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, these states were all competitive or lean territory. I think Wisconsin is the only one that's not even, Michigan's in the lean column, but Wisconsin is the only one that's actually a toss-up out of the four. Pennsylvania was initially considered lean for the Democratic Party because the incumbent governor there is very popular, but he is term limited. If you actually take a look at his 2014 results, he did very, very well. He did very well, and in 2018 he did even better. But 2014, I think I just wanted to point out because it was a very good year for the GOP on the national level. But pointing that out, that's probably why it's not initially characterized as lean for the Democratic Party. But just looking at this map, I will say the Democratic Party is at a much better point than where they were back in 2014. Looking at the 2014 gubernatorial election results, the Democratic Party did not have the advantages that they do currently in some of these seats. I mean, looking at some of these states, let's take the example of Michigan, Maryland, Illinois, and Nevada. These were all four states, New Mexico, 5 states that I can point out already. Might be another one, Maine, probably 2. Yeah, so that's 6. 6 states that had Republican incumbent governors. And, looking at the 2014 results, what you're seeing is that these were large margins for the GOP. Maine was close. Maine was a 5-point margin. Maryland was close. Maryland was around a 5-point margin. Illinois was close, but look at some of these states and their partisan nature. Maryland went to Biden by 30 points. Illinois was a safe state. Maine was nearly a safe state. And looking at some of these other victories, though, in New Mexico, that was not close. Nevada certainly was not close. I mean, the incumbent Republican won every single county. I mean, we're talking Clark County here going to the GOP. He won with 70.6% of the vote. That was very interesting to see. But looking at the 2022 race ratings, they're all for the Democratic Party, every single one of them, including Maryland, which was actually a GOP hold in 2018. When it went to the Republicans in 2014, it was one of the biggest flips in the entire country, joined by Massachusetts and Illinois. But then looking at 2018, only 2 of those remained the same way, Maryland being one included, where Larry Hogan, my governor, won by double digits. And I think that was something that was truly a testament to what the popularity of a governor can actually do. And the way that a governor handles certain situations, especially the COVID-19 pandemic, could do for some of these governors entering into 2022. Now, the only the only Republican races that are considered to be Republican incumbent governor seats that are currently toss-ups are Georgia and Arizona, prime targets for very obvious reasons. If you remember the 2020 election, the Democratic Party was able to flip both of those states for the first time since Bill Clinton's era. I mean, I had not even been alive when those states went blue. They also were able to flip Kansas in 2018, Wisconsin in 2018, and hold Pennsylvania, the Democrats being them. And looking at the toss-up map now, we only have around 5 toss-ups. Looking at 2018, we had a little bit more than 5. We had Alaska, Nevada, Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois. I'm not going to include Virginia because that was 2017. So Florida, Maine, and Connecticut. So that was a total of 9. That is more than 2022. But looking at it, it's not going to drastically change the party composition based off these initial ratings. We can apply this to the 270 to win map and just take away those toss-up races. Wisconsin's a toss-up, Pennsylvania's a toss-up, Kansas, Georgia, and Arizona. So now we're at a point where the Republicans are at 24, the Democrats are at 20. Well, that's already better than what 2014 showed us. The low point for the Democratic Party in the 21st century, the Republicans had 31 seats. The Democrats had 17, one independent seat, and then I believe this one ultimately came down to the Democratic Party. But looking at the Senate and House results, I mean, the Democratic Party was just at such a horrible point. I mean, we're talking 188 seats. The GOP decimated them on the House level. But looking at the governor result, you do have to say this is better than what could happen in 2022, even if they lose all 5 of the toss-up races. That was not 5. The Democrats are even at 21 because I forgot to characterize Maryland. So 21 is even better than what I was initially looking at. So even with these 5 races, it puts the GOP at 29 to 21. Not the best for the Democratic Party, but certainly not the worst. And I honestly don't think the GOP is going to have as lucky of a margin as they did in Arizona in 2022. Looking at 2018, Doug Ducey was just immensely popular. I mean, we were talking about a number of endorsements ranging from education all the way down to some Democratic local officials that put Doug Ducey in a position where on the same ballot of the Democratic Party winning control of the House of Representatives composition in Arizona, meaning there were more Democrats in the House from Arizona than Republicans, and flipping a Senate seat. I mean, this is something that was not supposed to happen for Democrats, at least in Arizona. 2 years later, they went on to win the state on the presidential level, but that makes Doug Ducey's margin even more impressive. And given the fact that he has now been censured by the Arizona GOP, which has taken a hard shift to the right, a hard shift to Donald Trump, I don't have much confidence in their ability to replicate Doug Ducey's victory or to replicate a victory at all. And I think that it's a very telling sign that a race that was decided by nearly 15 points in 2018 is now considered a toss-up today. That also shows that the factor of the incumbency is a very big thing. Maryland, which was decided by a likely Republican margin without the incumbent who is term limited, is now a flip state. It's the only flip we've seen on the 2022 ratings so far, but we could see maybe a few more, maybe in Kansas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, but that's the high point for the GOP. I think the Democratic Party, even if it is a red wave year, is still going to put up a pretty strong fight in Georgia, at least bring it down to lean. At least bring down Arizona to the lean column. I mean, in the worst case for Democrats, I think they would lose Georgia and Arizona by around 5 points. These states have taken significant shifts, and by the time we reach 2022, we're talking about nearly, hundreds of thousands of more Democratic voters in the state. Will they vote? Ultimately it comes down to, will they vote? We're talking younger voters, we're talking minority voters, voters that don't vote as high of a rate as white and older voters, and richer voters at that. And I think that also is going to be a telling sign about the Democratic Party's performance in 2022 if they can actually turn out voters the same way they did in 2020, specifically in Georgia and Arizona. Because those were significant underperformances for President Trump, and especially after the Georgia runoff elections, it's proof that the Democratic Party can do well statewide there without a presidential ballot being there. And I think 2022 will be a very important election. The Democratic Party is likely to jump onto their COVID-19 successes. I'm going to make a video about that tonight to talk about the strategy for Democrats moving forward and why it may or may not work. But looking at these ratings, the Democratic Party could be at a point where they are only winning 21 seats in total with the 5 that weren't up in 2022. Or they could potentially be retaining Wisconsin, retaining Pennsylvania, Kansas, winning Georgia, winning Arizona, which would put them at 26 to 24. Even in 2018, which was a stellar year for the Democratic Party, arguably one of their better years in the 21st century, they only reached 23. And this was with 7 pickups, a total of 7 pickups. We're talking Nevada, New Mexico, Kansas, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. What do you notice? Almost all of those states, and Maine, all of those states that flipped in 2018, besides Kansas, went to Joe Biden on the presidential level in 2020. So all the Democratic Party would need to do is replicate their 2020 victories. But that also wasn't something the GOP could do in 2018. Otherwise, we would have Republican incumbents in a number of these states. If you apply the map that Donald Trump won in 2016, you notice that the map looks a lot less lenient towards the Democratic Party, at least if we're talking about flipping states to the GOP, not flipping back Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts to the Democrats. But looking at this, that's what the map would be if we were talking about a Trump 2016 map. So it's not always easy to flip back certain states that you may have won in previous elections. The Democratic Party is not going to be able to win New Hampshire if Chris Sununu decides to run again. They're not going to be able to win Vermont if Phil Scott decides to run again. They're not going to be able to win again if Charlie Baker decides to run. The only reason why Maryland is considered a lean Democratic seat is because Larry Hogan is term limited. We don't have term limits per se in the Northeast. A lot of these states don't have term limits. Vermont and New Hampshire, they're elected every 2 years. So they run election after election after election. It's as if it's a House seat. But in Massachusetts, it's up every 4 years. And as I showed you in 2014, Charlie Baker was able to win it and then win it by a very large margin in 2018. I mean, we're talking about a complete obliteration for the Democratic Party in that state. It was a very, very telling sign for Charlie Baker entering into 2018 that he was going to win by a lot. But I don't think any of us really expected a 33-point margin of victory. But if he does decide to run in 2022, don't expect the Democratic Party to win there just because Joe Biden may have won the state by 33 points. Actually, more than that. But looking at the margin of victory here for Joe Biden, that's not always a telling sign that the state is going to go to the Democrats and vice versa. So governor elections are very much, down to the state, down to the constituents as to whether or not they approve of certain governors. With COVID-19 plaguing the nation, quite literally, it's going to be the number one issue that's going to be discussed looking beyond the pandemic. Hopefully, herd immunity by the summer and potentially a return to normal by early 2022. And I think that while this will be a very important issue, we are going to start directing our attention away from COVID-19. But I think if certain governors have made their constituents angry in policies or lack thereof, I think that we are going to see a lot of these governors see blowback in 2022. Looking at South Dakota, I think that was a very interesting governor result in 2018. I want to show you 2014 versus 2018. So what you notice is that in 2014, the Republican Party won 71% of the vote here. The Democratic Party did horrible. We're talking 1 in 4 voters. Not good whatsoever. But in 2018, they came very close. Now, Kristi Noem is a name you might recognize, a shining star in the GOP. But the problem in South Dakota is that 1 in 15 of the state's residents have contracted COVID-19. They don't have mask mandates. Kristi Noem does not enforce anything on her citizens. Whether for public health or not, she just doesn't believe in that. And she hasn't really spent much time in the state itself. We've seen a number of people in the state, Republicans too, attack Kristi Noem for such moves because rather than focus on her constituents, which are dying from COVID-19, she's at CPAC down in Florida. And I think that may come across as something as me trying to bash her in a way, but it is very wrong for a governor to not be in a state during a time of crisis. And I think now more than ever, that is needed. And she had a competitive Senate race. Not Senate race. I don't know why I keep saying Senate race. I'm used to looking at this 50-50 thing after the 2020 election. But looking at this governor race in 2018, it was close. But it doesn't look as if it's going to be close in 2022. Unless Noem falls out of favorite from the public itself. Because even though we are seeing some Republicans and obviously all of the Democrats attack Kristi Noem for such moves, she's still in a very partisan state. A very partisan state. You're not going to get around that. The state is just so Republican in nature that it's going to be very difficult for me to see how it could come down to being competitive. But then again, you look at 2018. It was initially rated as safe for the GOP. So maybe over the next year and a half, we could see a return of another Democrat like Billy Sutton that would be able to make the race competitive. Because Kristi Noem, I think, is going to be able to retain this GOP support, especially if 2022 does end up being a red wave year, but it certainly could be much closer than what it was for Donald Trump on the presidential level as it was in 2018. I mean, we're talking about a lot of crossover support here. In order for Billy Sutton to reach these numbers, we're talking 15, 16, 17% crossover support. So a very good amount of Republican voters that voted for Trump still voted for the Democratic Party. So while we may see that happen in 2022, I just wanted to point out South Dakota specifically because I can guarantee you're going to hear Kristi Noem's name a lot more over the next few years for the 2024 presidential election. We could see her actually ousted in 2022, but it probably won't happen. I think it could happen. This safe R characterization isn't exactly matching my point, but it definitely could happen because we saw it happen in 2018. So far what I'm expecting is that this map pretty much holds up, at least with all of the races that are currently characterized. I do think Maryland could flip in 2022. It depends on who runs on the GOP side. It might be closer than the presidential level. Actually, I'll tell you now, it's certainly going to be closer, but I don't think it'll be at a point where the GOP can retain it without Larry Hogan on the ballot. For some of these ratings, I think that it'll be interesting. What you'll notice is that there are barely any safe safe Democratic seats. Illinois, New York, and California are not safe for the Democratic Party. There are plenty of safe Republican states. The reason for that is because of the recall effort in California, that might be damaging to Gavin Newsom's view. But keep in mind, California is the state where Donald Trump received the most votes out of any state. It still has a lot of Republicans. So a 2 million signature headline isn't really news when Donald Trump won 5 million votes in the state. In New York, we are seeing Andrew Cuomo get bashed for a number of scandals, a number of things jumping onto his administration, and a number of things jumping onto the Democrats in the state of New York. It'll be a very interesting primary season in 2022. And then in Illinois, they also cite from the Sabato crystal ball, essentially that, these Democrats could be in better positions, and they're not considered safe Democratic seats for that reason. They could be in better positions than they are right now. Some of them are jeopardizing their re-election bids, whether through a primary or potentially through a general election. It ultimately comes down to whether or not these governors will be popular in 2022, to state the obvious, but that's why they're not initially characterized as safe for the Democratic Party. So, like I had said, I don't think many of these races are going to end up changing races. For these toss-up races, they will be the most invested in of the 2022 election cycle, and I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But that's just my first initial reaction to the 2022 governor ratings. I think that we will see a lot more over the next few months to see more updated and more initial ratings. I think that will be very interesting and very important to look at, because 2022 will certainly be a year that could be a red wave year, or because of COVID-19, be a year that would be okay for both parties. We still have yet to see. This is defying all historical expectations for a midterm year. As we see it evolve, I think it'll be very interesting to track the status of these races. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 midterm analysis election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.